the worst parenting you've ever witnessed? There are bad parents, and then there are parents so careless or cruel that you never forget what you saw. For me, the worst parenting I've ever witnessed happened when I was about 15 years old, on what should have been an ordinary summer day at an amusement park. It was one of those perfect summer afternoons, the kind where the smell of fried food and popcorn hangs heavy in the air, kids dart between games with sticky hands, and roller coasters rumble overhead every few minutes. I was there with two of my friends, just enjoying the freedom of being old enough to wander without our parents. We were hanging out near the bumper cars when I noticed a boy standing off to the side. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. He was small, with messy blonde hair, and clutched a cheap stuffed animal to his chest like it was the most important thing in the world. He wasn't laughing or playing, he just stood there wide-eyed and lost. I was about to point him out to my friends when the storm arrived. A woman, clearly his mother, came barreling through the crowd. Her face was red, her jaw clenched, and she was dragging another child by the arm so roughly the kid stumbled to keep up. "There you are!" she shouted at the little boy. "Didn't I tell you not to move? Do you ever listen?" Before the boy could even respond, she slapped the stuffed toy out of his grip. It hit the pavement with a dull smack, and people nearby actually turned their heads. The boy froze, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. And here's the part that crushed me. He didn't even cry, not a whimper. It was like he already knew crying would only make it worse. She wasn't finished. She bent down, grabbed his chin between her fingers, and hissed so loudly we could all hear, "You embarrass me every time we go out. Why can't you be more like your brother?" She yanked him upright so hard his arm jerked unnaturally, then shoved him toward the ride line. The better brother just stood there, frozen, his face a mix of relief that it wasn't him and guilt that he couldn't stop it. I remember standing there, 15 years old, furious and helpless. My friends and I whispered to each other, but none of us knew what to do. We were just kids. As they waited in line, the boy tugged on her sleeve and said softly, "I'm tall enough, right? Please?" It was the kind of hopeful, innocent question every kid asks at theme parks. But instead of encouragement, his mother laughed, this sharp, ugly sound that cut through the line. "Tall enough? You'll probably cry halfway through and pee your pants like a baby." The boy's face turned crimson. His shoulders curled inward. People in line looked away awkwardly. A few chuckled nervously, as if they didn't want to get involved, but couldn't ignore it either. I remember thinking, this is the worst parenting I've ever seen. But then something happened I'll never forget. A man in his 30s, standing just ahead of them in line with his own 2 kids, turned around. He looked the mother dead in the eye and said, calmly but firmly, "Hey, don't talk to him like that." The whole line went silent. The mother's head snapped up like she'd been slapped. "Excuse me?" she barked. The man didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He just said, "He's a kid. You're humiliating him in front of everyone. It's not okay." You could feel the air shift. Suddenly, all those bystanders who'd been pretending not to notice were paying attention. The mother sputtered about minding his own business, about not knowing her situation, but she didn't raise her voice again. She didn't insult her son again, at least not in public. And the boy? He stared at that stranger like he was some kind of superhero. For maybe the first time that day, someone had defended him. When they finally got to the front of the line, the ride operator measured him. "You're tall enough, buddy," he said with a smile. And I swear, the boy's entire face changed. The pride on his face, that brief flicker of self-worth, was enough to undo, if only for a moment, all the humiliation his mother had piled on him. I don't think anyone else in line noticed, but I did. That little moment of validation mattered. I've replayed that day in my head more times than I can count. The slap, the insults, the cruel laughter. Yes, those were awful. But what haunts me is how normal it seemed to the boy. How quickly he folded in on himself. How he didn't even cry. Like he'd learned crying only made things worse. And then, the contrast. How one stranger with a calm voice and a few words shifted the entire dynamic. He didn't fix everything, but for a few minutes that kid knew someone saw him. Someone believed he deserved better. I don't know what happened to that boy after that day. Maybe nothing changed at home. Maybe it got worse. But I like to believe that somewhere in his memory, he still carries the image of a man turning around in line and saying, "Enough." It taught me 2 lessons I've never forgotten. 1. Being a parent doesn't automatically make you good at it. 2. Sometimes the smallest act of courage, speaking up when it would be easier to stay silent, can give a kid a memory that reminds them they matter. And that's why, to this day, whenever I see a parent tearing down their child in public, I think of him. That lost little boy, his stuffed animal on the ground, and the stranger who stood up when no one else would.